We are live. Assalamu alaikum, my brothers and sisters. I hope everyone is well. I am very excited for today. I think we've been in discussions for over a week now. I think it's been 2 weeks or something. So I've been looking forward to this. I've got a very special guest on, a revert brother, originally from California, goes by the name of Marquett Davon Burton. You guys will know him as a saint and the sinner, as it says on his mic. I just complimented his mic. I said it's really cool. How are you, brother? You doing well?
I'm doing fantastically well. Thank you for having me. Assalamu alaikum.
Walaikum assalam. Your content is wild. It's really fascinating. I like your perspective on things. You're very intelligent at times and very provocative. You explain things really well. You're very clear in you're articulate and how you speak. Your level of understanding of the deen is really fast from what I see, and it's very impressive, the habits that you have. And you've lived an extraordinary life for what looks to be like a very young man. And may Allah give you a very long life, inshallah, to achieve even more than you already have. And I'm just going to say, not in order for anybody that doesn't know, from what I know, you've been a successful academic, you've been a teacher to underprivileged youth, you've flourished in international business, you're an athlete, a musician, an influencer, a public speaker, a coach, and you've traveled and lived all over the world, as we were just talking about. It's mad. It's remarkable. You have to tell me your secret and how you've got all of that done in such a short space of time. But like I said, you're originally from California, and you grew up in some rough neighborhoods. How did you move out of that and achieve everything, mashallah, that you did? Because a lot of people tend to not get out of that sort of living.
Sure, sure. Well, I number one, I appreciate the compliments. I really do take them to heart. And the first thing to understand about a ghetto is it can really be best described as a collection of persons who are suffering not financial poverty, but mental poverty. And any bankruptcy you observe there is generally of the moral variety. And I think that the easiest way to get out is number one, to have knowledge. And I was fortunate enough that I was blessed with knowledge from my family and from elders, and I was a student of the knowledge. And then, more importantly, even more than your merits, is to limit your vices, because you're in an environment where people have a lot of vices. So those are things that I was able to avoid. And I think that I had maybe 5 advantages, but you only really needed 2 to get out of a ghetto. I actually had 5.
Mashallah.
And one of them was that I was raised by conservative Christian Southerners. And in as much as that's the case, they said, hey, all the other black kids around here, they're getting tattoos. No tattoos for you. They have their ears pierced. We think women get their ears pierced. No earrings for you. And similar to the Muslims, like you have like the dunya and you have the things you're supposed to be doing to get to the akhirah. And they were very much so teaching me that you will not be like everyone else. And very early on, in this case, from a Christian perspective, I learned that if you actually are a religious person, you're not supposed to be like the others around you.
Yeah.
And so that was number one, that I was very clear that I am not like these people. Not to say that these are bad people. In the case of the ghetto, some of them are, but not to say that. But I always knew that there was a difference. So that's foundational. Then the second piece is that I had the good fortune of having fathers and masculine leaders very proximate and consistent in my life, which a lot of people are in lack. And thirdly, I had greater intelligence, in as much as when I was tested in public schools, American public schools, they'll test you for IQ, and I was tracked into gifted and talented education. So I did have some like natural advantage in the way of IQ, which of course is helpful. And then the last thing is that I had fear torn out of me in a fairly violent way. So once you add those advantages together, which is to say, to know who you are and also know who you are not, to have the example of a real man around you and to know what manhood is, and to not be scared, not be fearful. When you're not scared, it's easy to be yourself. It's easy to stand up. It's easy to say, that's not for me. And then, of course, to limit vices, which is to say, I never drank a drop of alcohol. I never used drugs one time. I never consumed caffeine, and I always stayed away from intoxicants. And even being from such a conservative family, I didn't even eat sugar as a child. So I didn't have candy. You know, if I was taught if someone gives you candy, you don't eat other people's food. You don't know these people. So if you get candy from an adult at school, put it in your pocket, throw it away later. You don't want to throw it away in front of them. It's rude. But those were some of the foundational things. Now, this is not to say I didn't get into trouble. Yes, I did all variety of things I highly recommend against. But the moral of the story is that while being wildly imperfect, you can still advance. And so it was my good fortune that I had a number of advantages that my peers probably didn't have. And that made it fairly easy. I shouldn't say easy, but it made it easier for me to get out of that position.
Oh, it's really interesting to hear that you grew up in a conservative household, like Muslims, where we live in a very conservative household when we're brought up, even though we're in a Western nation, some more than others.
Right.
But, yeah, America's got a big Muslim presence from a very long time. What were your experiences with Muslim community? Did you have a lot in your youth, or what was your general perspective of Islam? Because I know the media sort of portray one picture and it is actually something else.
I think I had a typical perspective of Islam growing up. And by typical, I mean misinformed.
Right.
So especially growing up as a Black American, your first introduction to Islam, or what you think is Islam, is the most palpable perception is the Nation of Islam. They have the word Islam in the title. You see these very neat brothers who are wearing bow ties and suits, no matter what temperature it is, and they're present in the community, and they appear to be doing good. And then you hear of a figure named Malcolm X. And at that time, you really don't understand him. You don't understand his relation to Islam. And as far as you know, you've never heard of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, but you have heard of the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad. You've heard of Farrakhan, and you've heard of Malcolm X. And so you're quite misinformed. And a ghetto is a place that's fairly isolated and, devoid of knowledge.
Mm-hmm.
Not until I got to university did I get introduced to perhaps what one might call mainstream Islam or Sunni Islam. However, I was not interested to it or introduced to it as a religion or as a spiritual force, but rather as a political force, as something that was dangerous and scary. And I didn't learn of Islam. I learned of Islamofascism and these crazy guys with big beards yelling, Allahu Akbar, and they're about to take us all out.
Yeah.
That's what I learned of. And that was in university. I took a degree in political science at the University of California, Berkeley. And so I came to understand it as a political force, a dangerous political force. Eventually, I decided to go into this program called Teach for America, which positions people from elite universities in America's ghettos to teach underprivileged youth. And I went to Baltimore. Specifically, I was in West Baltimore, some of the worst schools in the nation. And at that time, I observed some horrors, real horrors that the children were suffering. And it was some of the most challenging experiences I had ever had in life, seeing kids suffer and wondering, like, who cares about you? It seems like no one cares about you, not your parents, because they're on drugs, they've overdosed, you're being raised by your grandparents, not the school. They wouldn't even let the kids in the school in the morning when it's snowing. They had to wait outside. Not the society here. No one cares about you. And there's a church on every corner. There's also a drug dealer and a prostitute on every corner as well. And that sent me on a spiritual journey. And that's when I learned of Islam, not by seeking Islam, but by seeking where are the good people and what makes sense. And I went to a bunch of different religions, and I ended up settling on Islam because of the Qur'an and the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. And it was because the Qur'an made sense. It was clear, and it was a complete way of living.
How did your family take that? Because obviously you said you came from quite a Christian household. Did they just expect you to become, or to, Christianity was your religion, really, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was certainly my religion. And of course, I'm giving you all the short version of my life right here. Of course, speaking to a 25-year period, there's more complexity. You can read about this in my book, The Black Box. I don't want to misrepresent, so I just want you to be aware I am summarizing. Yes, I was raised Christian. I was raised by Southern Christians from Arkansas, and most Black Americans are raised Southern Baptist, which is a specific form of Christianity. Generally has, gospel, people catching the Holy Ghost. Oh, I caught the Holy Ghost. They're falling out in church and rolling around, speaking in tongues, like all kinds of wild stuff, real theatrical. In fact, you go to a Southern Baptist service and you're going to hear great music, excellent music. You're going to see some Black women catch the Holy Ghost. You might not even hear anything from the Bible. It's amazing. They might not even crack open the Bible the whole Sunday. But I was raised Christian, and I was a part of the church up until I went to university, and I even sought out Christian organizations. And then more and more, it wasn't making sense to me.
Yeah.
As I was beginning to question things in university, I was reflecting. I was thinking, you know what, the guy who led the choir director was a Skittle guzzler in the Bible. God didn't like that. How is it he's in a prominent position in the church? There's so many things that didn't make sense. And so I began to question. And of course, you're in university, you're studying. And that kind of led me on my path. One of the things I appreciate about Islam is that in the Quran, it says, do you have the religion of your fathers? Because it's the religion of your fathers, which is to say, have you not questioned it, examined it, and asked, is this true? I think
Yeah.
that's very important. To your question about how did my family take this? Well, number one, I was initially raised by my mother. My father was in prison doing a significant amount of time for drug sales. And so I was raised by my mother. My stepfather was in and out. And my grandmother was more present because she was retired. She's an old woman. And so at some level, I had the privilege of experiencing what people would think of as a stay-at-home mom because she was retired. She had time. She really poured into me. It was very helpful. I was always very serious and competent as a child. And so my mother always respected my decisions. And when I reverted to Islam, my mother respected that. She's always respected it because I've had a track record of making good decisions and having good outcomes. So my family appreciated that. Now, my grandmother's still Christian to this day. You couldn't convince her of anything else. Everyone else in my family, they're halfway Christian. And that's mostly what we're dealing with today in all of the religions, is that people are not committed. And those who are actually committed, we tend to view them as extremists, when in reality, whether you're a Jew, a Muslim, or a Christian, the way you would live if you were to follow your book is extreme compared to what you're observing in the society. It's extremely different.
Yeah.
But yes, they respected it. And I know that's not entirely common because Islam is viewed as something for Arabs, and Islam is viewed as something that is dangerous among the American mainstream. Although when you really look at scholarly opinion, as far as monotheistic religions go, Islam is actually closer to Christianity than Judaism is. Although usually they tend to pair Judaism and Christianity together, and they put Islam far off to the side as like this dangerous thing.
Yeah. Do you have any brothers and sisters, or were you just an only child?
I felt like an only child because my younger brother is 7 years off, and I was living a very fast life as a young man. I left home quite early. And so I left home. My brother was 10, 11 years old. And so there was a very large gap, but I was not an only child. I had a younger brother, and we're radically different in as much as I grew up in a violent ghetto, and he grew up in the lower middle class. And so our personalities and our background was quite different.
Yeah, from what it looks like. That's amazing. It's really cool to hear your story, and your family seem really down to earth, really just kind-hearted people. You've been raised mostly by women, by what you've said, and that sometimes is more. Sometimes it can be a hindrance to men. Not a hindrance. I think boys need their dads, don't they? Just like girls need
Absolutely.
their dads as well. And that must have been quite hard. I didn't grow up with my dad around, and it was tough for me as a woman. My husband didn't grow up with his father around. His father passed away really young, so it can be a difficult thing. So it's amazing to see that you've flourished from that and come out the other end.
I don't know if I could rightly say that I grew up around a lot of women, in as much as my mother was one of 9 children. So it's about half girls, half boys. And every other weekend I went and stayed the entire weekend with my uncle and his father. So we had a proper nuclear family. So fortunately I was able to, actually live in there essentially as the son of my uncle. And it was of great benefit. I also had a stepfather.
Right.
Fathers are absolutely critical to the family. We know this from the dean. We also know this from the science. Like the sociology indicates that you're going to have better outcomes. And that's something that whether we grew up in a single mother household like you and I and your husband, we have to be clear about that. And I think one of the things that saddens me about Islam today is, we're starting to live like the kuffar. We're starting to adopt their values and their beliefs. What they say is like, a woman needs to get her education.
Yeah.
He needs to get a PhD and become a doctor and then become a mother.
Yeah.
Well, by then, love, you're 33 and your eggs are no good. Whereas conversely, in Islam, it says you should marry early. So we're going directly against the teachings of Islam, and we're starting to yield to culture or yield to Western values, and it's very dangerous. And these are the things that make it hard for family. And as you mentioned, family is important, and fathers and family absolutely necessary, and we shouldn't be missing that at all.
Yeah. No, I definitely agree with you there. Yeah, it's a big issue just now, and we'll get on to that soon. I've got a couple of questions about you and what you view as Islam today. I've just got a couple of super chats if you're okay, and I'll just quickly shout them out before we move on. So Major Mind and Soul says, peace to the saints. Thank you for hosting the saint. It should be very fruitful conversation for us all. Thank you very much, Major Mind and Soul. I am looking forward to it too. I have another one from Saint R.E. Peace to the saints and peace to the Muslim mum. We thank you for having our mentor on your platform. Wishing you much success in your endeavours. Thank you very much. You have a lot of people that are proper backing you, which is great, mashallah. Deeply Goated said PTTS.
Peace to the saints, that means.
The saints.
We putting you on the ism now. You're learning a little bit about
I'm
this
learning
ism.
everything. I'll be saying that as well. That's pretty cool. Yeah, so my husband actually introduced me to you. So I actually learned about you through my husband. He thinks you're great, and he was watching your YouTube videos, and that's how I started watching them. He thinks you're a real sort of street guy, but what sets you apart from the average street person is that you're really intelligent, you've got a lot of class, and you seem to know when to hit different sides of your personality. You know, like you've got different sides of your personality, but you know which ones in which company or which situation to use. I actually bought him your book, the Black Box. It was a gift that I bought him, and he read it in 48 hours. He loved it. He really enjoyed it. He loves books, and that was one because he was watching your content. I was like, right, I'll get him that. So, am I correct in saying that you were based in the Middle East for a while? Did that play a part in your reversion to Islam?
I've been to the Middle East a lot, and one place I've spent the most time was the Kingdom of Morocco, probably on 7 different trips. And I don't think that actually positively impacted reversion to Islam.
Right.
In fact, sadly, observing Muslims is probably the greatest deterrent to Islam.
Yeah.
And I think this is not unique.
That is sad to hear.
Yeah, right. There's some beautiful things in that you'll observe in the Ummah. Mashallah, we have some great places you can go and feel spiritual warmth. But the general conduct, I think, is we're often falling short in significant ways. And one of the reasons I don't speak so much of Islam is because people who know a Muslim, I don't want to be associated with that person often because their behaviors are not very good.
Yeah.
So it is a bit. My travels in the Middle East or in Arab countries have been a bit disappointing, but in other ways have been very beautiful. Even for example, in South Korea, I used to have an office in South Korea. I went to the masjid there, and it was just extraordinary to be in a place where really no one speaks Arabic, but you go in to make salah, and you got guys there from Eastern Europe, you got guys there from the Arab world, from Africa, you have Korean Muslims, and everyone is making salah in the proper way that was taught to us by the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, and they're following the Sunnah. And of course, you have pockets of good and bad everywhere, but no, being in the Middle East did not drive me toward reversion.
Oh gosh, what was the deciding factor? I mean, I know you said that you were helping underprivileged kids and that made you look into Islam, but what was it that shone in Islam for you? The reading the Quran, you said as well.
Yeah. So the story of the Prophet Muhammad, and sometimes I'll say things that are obvious to you and I, and probably to your audience as well. I know some of my audience is watching and they don't hear me speak of Islam much, so I'll have to give a little bit more background. But Prophet Muhammad, and correct me where I'm wrong, born 570. His father had passed before he was born, so like almost like similar to you and I, in a situation without a father. And then I think 6 months after that, Amina, his mother, passed away, and so he was essentially an orphan. And you, of course, learn much from Hadith. There are some who don't, take Hadith, but Hadith is very powerful, which is to say the stories of, the life of the Prophet Muhammad. What did he say? What did he do? And then you have Quran. It speaks a lot of orphans. And to me, that was very powerful because I never thought so much about orphans until I became a teacher in Baltimore. And particularly some of my students, some of my female students, they would just experience such horrors like sexual abuse. And I know it's because no one was looking over them. No one was watching over them. In Islam, you have the concept of the wali. You have the concept of a man who's supposed to be watching over a child, and it also often speaks of orphans, and it specifically says, you know, if you're going to give of charity, give to your family, give to orphans, and give to travelers. And it's always bringing up this the child that needs to be taken care of. And I think the orphan is a meaningful metaphor in as much as, you know, even as adults, sometimes we feel like orphans. You might feel alone, or you might feel like no one's caring for you or looking after you. And that was very powerful to me. And so that was one of the biggest things that brought me to Islam, because when I was observing these children suffering so much and I went on my journey, here was a religion saying that, you know, we have to take care of these kids. This is our responsibility. And I really didn't find that in any other religion. And I really looked at it in a fairly dry academic sense comparatively, which is to say, like, I couldn't become Jewish because that's blood based. And I'd grown up Christian, so I was familiar with that. And then a lot of the other faiths had their like culture and their race on the faith, you know, like, you know, it was connected to a certain ethnic group. And Islam was supposed to be for all of mankind. And I thought that was very powerful. When you walk into the masjid, I remember my first time like it was yesterday. Big stack of shoes. I thought it was very clean because at the time, you know, I had an office in Korea, and the Asian, we take off the shoes before you come in. That's the way I grew up as a Black person. You take off your shoes when you come to the house.
Yeah.
Right? It's clean.
Yeah.
And then everyone was sitting on the floor, and I thought this was curious in as much as at the time I was a well-to-do businessman in a business suit, and I was like, wow, there's guys like me sitting on the floor in proper business suits. You got guys that look like they just finished doing day labor. They're sitting on the floor right next to me. You have old guys wearing, at the time, what I just thought like, whoa, it looks like they're fresh out of the Middle East. These guys came fresh from Saudi. This is authentic. I saw these guys on TV, and they're all together, different colors, and I thought it was very powerful. And I never liked gospel music. I always found it to be too loud and a bit of a distraction. There was like no music, there's no loud sounds. You look around, there's not a bunch of stained glass with idols of like some random white dude with impaled with spikes, and it was so simple. The only thing in that masjid was God. There was nothing else. And the beauty of the voice reciting the word of God, it was so powerful. And that's what took me. And you know, then you have to deal with now the reality of the Ummah. You come in with the Quran, which is perfect. You come in with your understanding of the Prophet Muhammad, the best among men, and then you have to deal with the Ummah after that. And so that has been the ongoing struggle, is trying to understand, how do we get something so beautiful from God, yet we don't have enough fear or respect to follow.
Yeah, that's very true. I've never heard someone speak about reverting to Islam through that way, you know, going through orphans. And that's the first time I've spoken to quite a lot of reverts since I've started this channel, and that's the first time I've heard that. And it's actually sparked something in me, because it's not something that I've, you know, you read about it and it is a big thing, but it's never been the thing that's jumped out at me, and it has now. So thank you for that. And you're right. And do you still go back to Baltimore? Do you still see the kids? Do you know how they're doing?
No, definitely not. I've had kids reach out to me. You know, kids will shoot me a DM. Hey, Mr. Burton, like, this is crazy. I saw you on YouTube. Or hey, Mr. Burton, I just want to let you know you changed my life. Or Mr. Burton, you're the only father I had. And those things are really powerful. You know, after I taught, I went into business. I've been in business for some time. The kids that I taught are now proper adults. You know, I'm sure they have kids and everything. But one of the important things to understand, and this is what happens when you're not living within an ummah. I think it's really important that Muslims live among Muslims, good people live among good people, because, you know, I was out in the dunya, you know, and I'm teaching in a secular school. You have to maintain a distance, you know, lest you may be legally liable. You don't know who you're dealing with. You know, the parents might be on drugs or have mental issues. And so you have to keep a proper distance for your own protection legally, especially as a man in today's society. And so in as much as that's the case, you don't exchange contact information or anything with a kid. So pretty much when I was done teaching, I was on to business, as I should have been, because I learned something from my good friend, his mother, a Jewish family. His mother had contacted me when I was thinking about continuing teaching. And she said, Marquett, what I know of you, I don't think you should do this anymore. And I'm thankful that I had his mother to tell me, because my mother didn't have the experience and knowledge to be frank with me and give me this message. She said, you want to help people, right? I said, yes, absolutely. She said, yeah, that's why you're teaching. You have a good heart. But, you know, real men, they help people by cutting a big check. Can you cut a big check being a teacher? She was like, no, you're basically in the plan of some other guy who cut a check, or you're following what someone else is doing. They're probably not doing the right thing. So you need to go get some money, Marquett, and cut a check if you really want to do something. Because, you know, working for a nonprofit or being a teacher, that's really what women do. Are you a rich man's wife, Marquett? And she said that in a very blunt, rude, straightforward way. But I had to appreciate what she was telling me. And it set me on the right path, the straight path, you might say.
Yeah, though that's true words, and you don't think about it like that sometimes. That, I mean, we have this conversation all the time about giving to charity, and who do you give to? Who do you trust with your money? How do you know it's going to the right person? How do you know that it's going to reach, you know, who you want it to reach? 9 times out of 10, it probably doesn't. So yeah, if you can do it yourself and actually physically be the person that hands that check over to the people that need it, she was right. Yeah, that is the way to go. I've got a couple of more. I've got so many super chats today, which is great. None of the above 101 that said peace to the saints. I'm going to start saying that now. It's going to be my tagline. Yama World said, Assalamu alaikum, wa alaikum assalam. Marquett is a good brother. He helped me with a lot with my business. Oh, alhamdulillah, that's great. MashaAllah, brother, you're doing good work. Disqualified dads, no comment, but hello, assalamu alaikum. I'm so glad that you've joined us. And lastly, we've got NDPT. This means peace to the saints. Right? We're learning. Right. Thank you, Marquett, for always educating and showing a multi-faced look into what a great man should be. Keep hustling, SASN or nothing. Thank you so much. MashaAllah, brother, you've got a lot of people behind you, which must make you feel really good that you are making a difference to people's lives.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's the people who have super chatted. I think most of those folks I've had the privilege of meeting. Every now and then I'll host a conference, so you know, I get to actually shake hands and get to know these men, and so that does make me very proud. Certainly, I've not wanted to be like famous or in the public eye because it comes with other things. And ironically, you know, I remember hearing this from Mufti Menk. And when I was coming into Islam, of course, you're listening to all of the scholars. Yep. And Mufti Menk is the most palatable one because he has humor and charm and a big, beautiful beard. And I remember him talking about getting the evil eye and people being jealous. And, you know, I'd been a businessman before that, no fame or clout, but you know, doing well in business. And so I find that there are excesses, and I've grown to become and also to appreciate the reluctant leader, one who doesn't really want to have to be in the position of leadership or to be in the center of attention. I just find that there are some things that need to get done, and most people are too scared to do it, or they don't have the integrity to get it done. I mentioned Mufti Menk because he's someone that I admired very much. And then I heard him on an interview, the Northern European woman who's very liberal, and she was asking him some very straightforward questions that any Muslim, any proper Muslim, I don't care what school you come from, I don't care if you're Maliki or Hanif or whatever you call yourself, Shia, Sunni, whatever you are, we would have all had the exact same answer. And he did not give that answer. And I could tell that maybe he was becoming victim of his own fame and celebrity. And I was just thinking, ironically, he taught me that this is not what's important. And so I try to be reluctant about you know, being pleased with a bunch of people following me, which is not really what I want. What I really want is for all of the people I teach themselves to be great leaders, to have great families, and to come together, because nothing will be achieved by one man. Not even the Prophet Muhammad got the whole job done. Yeah. And so I think what we can do collectively is very important. And so I'm trying my best to foster that.
Yeah. And, you know, it seems like you're doing that job. And like I said previously, you know, when I watch your videos, you tell the truth no matter what people might think or how it comes across. You do tell the truth. And some of your videos are very blunt, but it needs to be said, which is why that someone like you needs to say it. And most of us, on whoever's got a platform, needs to be honest. I think sometimes there's this fear in people of, oh my gosh, what if I get cancelled, or what if they take me off? But, you know, that can't stop you from telling the truth. There is a way to tell the truth. You don't need to be aggressive. You know, there's a way to say what you have to say in a very calm, cool manner, which is what I'm trying to do.
You know, I think people that watch my channel probably chuckling right now because they heard me speak of the Prophet so many times. I try to never do it. I think a lot of people have found Islam through me, but not necessarily through me talking directly about Islam.
Yeah.
But you had spoken of being canceled, and sometimes we think these things are new, but really they're not. And we think of being canceled and losing all of our money and losing our job and all of these consequences. And even for the Christians, they have Jesus as an example, a prophet to us, a component of God to them. And Jesus said, if you would follow me, leave everything that you have, which is to say all of the material things, the things that you cherish in the dunya, it's irrelevant. Leave that, follow me. And then we have the Prophet Muhammad, one of the best scholars I've heard speak of. He broke up the Prophet Muhammad's life in a couple of sections. Each of those sections was characterized by great pain. Early section, you lose both of your parents, you become an orphan. And then he goes through, okay, now you've gone against your entire Arab culture that you've grown up in, and the whole society against you. You're at war with the Quraysh, you're at war with these people. You're telling them that all their gods are idols. Now your people are being oppressed. You're running around the world trying to find a home during an era where people didn't really leave the place they grew up, right? Like you would not be an Arab among Africans. You're going to Abyssinia and all these places. And every time it's characterized by struggle. You have to have fighting spirit. They're going to try to take everything from you. There's a time they tried to starve them out. You have the death of Khadijah and all of these things that he's experiencing that are extremely traumatic and challenging, yet he carries on. And I think that's the example that we have. It's a great example. And so to be canceled is really very little in comparison to people, in his case, trying to starve his followers. They wouldn't do trade with them. They tried to kill them literally, and they were in actual war. We're not facing any of that. No. Worst case scenario, you lose your house and your luxury cars and you're fine.
Yeah. It's because it's such a massive thing just now, and so many people, I mean, maybe because it's a new thing from our generation. I mean, like you said, it has been going on from way back then, but it's such a, what's the word? It's like just a thing now, isn't it? I can't think of the word. It's not coming to the top of my head, but it's happening so much. That's it. Trend. Yes, it is. It's a trend. It's happening so much that it is a trend. Yeah. You're a fantastic role model for young men, and I know you don't drink, and you don't take intoxicants. You said that earlier, and I've seen your videos on that as well. And even you think about men who go with women who don't drink and don't smoke is the way to go. And you respect your physical health. You're very, you're athletic. I also don't drink. I've never drank or smoked due to Islam, but also because it's never been something that's been, I've never really been into it. Like I don't actually see the point. I don't see the point. And maybe that's a good thing. I think maybe once people try it and maybe they feel that then they go into a cycle of not coming out of it. But if you've never had it, you're like, you see it from a different perspective. And I've seen you don't use caffeine, which is great. Do you have any advice for people that are, like I said, get caught up in that, for Muslims and non-Muslims, and for men especially? How would you help them to come out of that?
The number one thing to understand is all of the things that are being prohibited in the Quran are bad for you.
Yeah.
They're all bad for you.
There's a reason. Yeah. Very
much so. And sometimes it's a matter of degree, but they're all bad for you. And you ask yourself, whether you're Muslim or not Muslim, if I do these things that I know are bad for me, that I know will hurt me, how do I feel about myself? And the truth of the matter is that we don't love ourselves enough. And I always say, start with trying your best to understand the self and love the self. Because when we're engaging in these intoxicants, we're destroying ourselves, and we're destroying our chances to get all the things we really want. If you want a beautiful woman, an intelligent, pious woman, you're going to be better equipped to get her when you're physically in shape, you're strapping, you're upright, you're sharp intellectually, you're wealthy, you have all of the things that a great woman would want. And so I think it roots in reality from actually having low self-regard. And there's a lot of theories in psychology. Even Freud says that the human being has a secret death wish. And I always try to give a secular perspective on things, in as much as some people are like, oh, well, your religion, I don't share your religion. And fair enough. Yeah, that's one of the beautiful things about Islam is most everything it says you can find in science as well. And then your fitra, your natural sense of right and wrong, and being able to listen to your body. So for example, what happens if you drink too much water? You might have to use the restroom. What happens if you drink too much alcohol? You die. It's called alcohol poisoning. These things are clearly bad for you. And so what we try to do or what I try to do is tell you to show the best of who you are so that you can get the best of things because you deserve the best. And, you know, the challenge today is that we have a lot of superheroes, and some of which have been falsely, you know, they've been portrayed as like a Muslim mascot. Look, this guy reverted. Look, this celebrity reverted. Oh, you should be like this guy. And many of them are really just watering down what we actually are. And the truth of the Muslim, a Muslim woman and a Muslim man is the most disciplined person in the society. Prays 5 times a day at a specific time. You had to do wudu and do all of these things and set your intention and have proper niyyah before you prayed every time. And then you fast for an entire month. That's an extraordinary level of discipline. But so many of us are lying. How could we ever have a fat Muslim? That shouldn't even exist. Doesn't even make sense. And that lets me know that some of us, when we're fasting, we go in the bathroom, we drink some of the water from the sink, come out looking really refreshed. We're not supposed to do that. We're eating when we shouldn't have been eating. We're lying. But if you actually follow the deen of Islam, you'll be one of the most impressive people ever because you'll be so disciplined, you'll be so timely. And most of all, you have to be honest with yourself. And one of the things that differentiates Islam from, say, Catholicism, which I really appreciated, is like, hey, there's you and there's Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You don't have to confess to a human being who's sitting in a box, who might have strange sexual proclivities. You don't confess to him. You confess to Allah, which is to say Allah's watching and you're watching, no one else. So you have to regulate yourself and tell the truth to yourself. Be honest. So many of us are lying. But I say that in summary, I like to, you know, give like a 3-sentence guidance. Be yourself, be good to yourself, be good to good people. Being good to yourself, that's one of the challenges of folks who are destroying themselves with pornography, alcohol, drugs, coffee, what have you.
Do you think it's related to sort of what we see now, social media, on, you know, media and stuff like that? People are just following what is in and how to be. They're sort of being told. Sometimes I think of us all as sheep. You know, I think people that do those things are just sheep and they're just following the herd. And if to not be that sheep, you're like, and then they look at you like, what? You don't drink? You don't smoke? Huh?
Right.
You've never had alcohol? And I'm like, why is that mad to you? Do you know? Or when they ask during Ramadan, what, no water? And I'm like, no, it's only a month. And recently I watched a podcast and they actually said fasting is so good for your health. You should fast every day. You should only eat between 11 and 8 and fast for the rest of the day. And it you know, it was amazing to see. And I was like, people don't actually look into these things. They just think your religion is got laws and, oh, sad for you that you have to follow these laws.
Right. You know,
Yeah.
It's such a sad thing because we're struggling. There are some people who are wicked. There's just no doubt about that. There's some people who are wicked. So there's that. Then there's also culture. And what I mean by culture is, for example, I remember my many trips to Morocco. You go and sit in a cafe in Morocco. Now, I love the food. They have excellent food. If you go to Morocco, get some chicken tagine, you'll thank me later. But if you sit down, they're going to start pouring you some Moroccan mint tea. Tons of sugar in this stuff. So they start pouring you some mint tea. I tell them, no, brother, I don't drink tea. I don't drink Moroccan mint tea. No, thank you. Oh, yeah. You need this. You need it. He keeps pouring. You need this. It's culture. So it's like, if you're Moroccan, you're going to drink this tea. If you're British, you're going to, you know, have tea. Or if you're Indian, like we always have this kind of coffee or this chai. And so at a certain level, you have culture, and culture sometimes has problems. Like I come from the Black American culture. Certainly we have some problems within the culture. And here's when it gets really bad and dangerous. You know, it might sometimes appear good, but it's really bad. In the Quran, it says that there are some things that you think are good for you that are actually bad for you. And there's some things that you think are bad for you that are actually good for you. And this goes in line with, you know, some of your friends in Scotland or UK. They're like, oh, you don't drink? You go to the pub, have a sip, you're going to enjoy it. Like, no, actually, you think it's good for you, but it's actually bad for you. And here's the thing with Black culture. So one, we have the most influential culture globally. We're disproportionately influential, given that we're such a small population. And what I noticed growing up in a Black ghetto, there are a number of things that are actually vices, whether you're talking about being a hustler or drug dealer, or you're talking about being a gangster. We had something called gangster music. And these are things that you experience in the ghetto. And then you turn on the television and you see your culture is on the television. and it's being idolized and it's being commercialized, generally not by Black people, but it's being commercialized effectively by certain groups of people. And so you're seeing your culture in two ends. One, you're actually doing it in the ghetto, and then you turn on the television, or in this case on social media, and you see gangsterism being glorified, and they're even exaggerating it at that level. When you see it on the television and social media, it's being exaggerated and it's being made to be more beautiful, more appealing than it really is. You never see like a guy who's in a wheelchair from being a gangster and being victim of a drive-by shooting. But you see the guys crip walking and doing their gangster music and all this stuff, and it looks great. And in as much as that's the case, you're having it marketed to you, and human beings will fall to marketing messages. As a businessman, I know that if you deliver a marketing message 17 times, the person will fall. If it's something that they'll buy, like you can't sell a tampon to a man, I guess, unless they're in San Francisco. But generally you can't sell a tampon to a man. They're just not going to buy it. But if it's something that they would buy, you hit them with 17 marketing messages, they'll fall. That's how the human psyche is. So the question for us is, how do we insulate ourselves? How do we stand strong enough to know who we are and who we are not? And how do we deal with culture and know that, like, hey, that's not my culture. Now, the beautiful thing about Islam is it respects culture. Sometimes people confuse it for culture, but it's religion, and your religion should always supersede your culture. And in this case, even your values and your health should supersede culture.
Yes, you're right. You're so right. And I wish more people thought like you and spoke like you, and told everybody about the benefits of not following culture and not following the herd. I've seen you in the company of heavyweight boxing champion Tyson Fury and attending, many high-profile boxing matches, which looks like a lot of fun. As well as your videos of participating in the sport yourself. In Islam it says, men are protectors, and could you outline why it's important to you that men should protect themselves and their families?
Absolutely. And also shout out to Terrence Crawford, a good friend who just became a champion and made a tremendous amount of money and is now as famous as he should have always been. So shout out to Terrence. Number one, as Muslims, you're supposed to follow the Sunnah, the example of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. And one thing that I have always admired in the stories is that he has fighting spirit. So many opportunities to say, okay, I'm done, or okay, I give up. But he did not. And that's the example that we follow.
Yeah.
Furthermore, the man has a number of roles and responsibilities. We have privileges, we have roles and responsibilities. Similarly, the woman has privileges, roles, and responsibilities. Of one, we're specifically defined as a protector. And if we can't protect ourselves, we can't protect anyone. So as a basic, being at your strongest, I don't care if you're 5'2" or 6'8". I know you guys are in centimeters, I guess 100. I don't care if you're 160 centimeters or 190 centimeters. One, having a strong body supports having a strong mind. The science proves that. Number two, a bit of training will probably allow you to put down any man in the society, for he is not trained and he's generally out of shape, both physically, mentally, and spiritually. And number three, here's the truth. And we hear this concept of jihad, and certainly in the West, the word has been misinterpreted and misapplied intentionally. But the jihad is in many levels. Of course, the jihad internally to be our best selves. And of course, exercise is a part of that. But also we must know that we're in desperate times now. We're in times in which we must fight, and we have to have fighting spirit, and we will come to blows. And what I mean by that is this. In America today, when I travel the world, I often hear people say, oh, you guys are crazy. Not in Europe, they don't say that, but in proper places in Asia and Africa, the Middle East, they say you guys are crazy. You guys, you mutilate your children. Your children are confused. Well, most Americans, truth be told, don't believe in that. But the problem is when good people, when the religious people, when people of the book, when they stay silent, when they fail to fight, these other elements dominate. And so you have to know that you have to be prepared to fight in all areas, physically, spiritually, intellectually, and otherwise. And the physical level is the lowest level. So it's a basic for man. And of course, you want to look good, feel good. We all want to be appealing. And especially for the brothers who are unmarried, put forward your best effort so that you might get the best woman.
Yeah, and it was like when my husband is very much similar to you. When I first met him, he was very much into MMA and boxing, and he was so into the gym. And I'd never met a man like my dad or my brother were not like that. People in my family were not like that. I thought it was quite obsessive. Um, and still to this day, he's like that. But it was the first time I felt protected by a man, not just physically. I mean, there's other aspects, but because physically he was so, and like you said, I know doesn't matter what happens, he would be the one that I would shout, and I know I'll be fine because he will protect me. So it's so important for a man to know his place and know what he's supposed to do. And if he doesn't, then the woman doesn't know her place. Some women end up thinking that they have to be the protectors and they try and be the man, and it's like then the whole dynamic just gets mixed up, and I'm sure you've seen that a lot.
Yes. Yes.
I've got a couple of more super chats. Sorry, we've got loads in today. Just to Marcus H, peace to the saints. And we've got Saint Key, shout out to the big homie. Been watching this man since I was a sophomore in college, January 2021. He nourished me with knowledge and he made me take action, PTTS. Oh, that's great. That must make you feel so good. It would make me feel great to hear people benefit from you. So that, mashallah, that's great. You are financially successful. You've built various businesses like we were talking about. You are, hopefully, inshallah, now you're that person that writes the big checks. You're very international. You've got international tech companies and selling amazing products, and you've got your book and your clothing line. Why is it so important for young men to learn how to make money? Obviously, writing the big checks, but I'm sure there's more to it than just that, than doing, the dead end jobs that maybe don't get them very far.
Well, stop me when you've heard enough, because I can go
I'm
in.
so excited for your answer. Go for it.
But, first thing I want to be clear about is, and this is because you have a lot of folks on the internet who may be well off, and some of them may be pretending to be well off,
Yeah.
and they can't see past their nose. In my case, I'm very aware of my position, and my position is uncommon. Give me a second. I have to plug in my computer.
Yeah, no, take time.
Okay. My position is very uncommon, and I'm aware of that. So very few people will be able to achieve financially on the level that I'm on. And truth is, I don't think most people even want that. I think most people just want to be happy. So first of all, I want everyone to know that if you can master being happy on a consistent basis, you're winning in life. Then secondly, although I've not had a job in a very long time, I've had very few jobs. I've hired a lot of people, and I know that not everyone's going to be a boss or an entrepreneur, and I respect that. And I want to say my compliments to hardworking men and women who have 9-to-5 jobs. There's nothing wrong with that. Obviously, you always want to be thoughtful about your greater goals and your plan, but don't ever be ashamed to have a 9-to-5 job, or don't always think that you're in the rat race. Someone's going to have a 9-to-5 job. Believe that. Not everyone can be the chief. Someone has to be the Indian, and so that's one thing I just want to put firmly on the table. Now, for the bosses, yes, when you establish a certain level of wealth, you can actually access something called freedom. Until you have a certain amount of wealth, you will never even know what freedom is. And once you start exercising freedom, then you will realize the limits of your freedom, and you'll realize that your government is fairly corrupt. But here's the thing. Why is it so important to accumulate capital? Well, number one, let's talk on the religious side, since here we are. As a man in the Quran, this is actually one of your requirements, that you actually be a financial provider. Whereas, and correct me if I'm wrong, the woman does not have to allocate her earnings to maintaining the family. So this is a requirement for you if you were to follow the deen. And that is a reasonable example. Beyond that, to have a financial base, it provides you the ability to think of other things. You see, when you don't have a financial base, your constant idea racking your brain and traumatizing you is survival, which is a very low level to live. It's very basic. So I always promote, number one, learn how to be thrifty, appropriately thrifty. I have a course called Boss University. As a wealthy man, I talk about how to be thrifty. It's critically important, and you should exercise thrift and teach this to your wife and your children. Then number two, appropriate budget allocation and spending. Making money is one thing, but knowing how to allocate and save money and invest money is yet another thing. And then number three, the reason that you want wealth is because it gives you choice and power. What I mean is this: You have the choice not to send your kids to that public school where they're dealing with other kids who have suffered serious trauma. And when those kids have pain inside them, let me promise you, they're going to share it with everybody else. They're going to be doing unfortunate things. You have the option to send your kid to a private school, or if you're religious, you can send your kid to a religious school, or if you're really wealthy, you can homeschool your kid, or you can create your own school. Those are critical things that will shape your family. It will affect your happiness. It'll affect your lineage and your legacy. Furthermore, you don't have to deal with minor stresses. Like, for example, I took a few of my cars in for service. The refrigerator in one of my cars is needs some service on it. And I don't have to worry like, oh, I can't get here and there. I have a couple other cars, so it doesn't matter. I don't have to think about basic things like this.
Yeah.
And so when you have a financial base, you get to experience peace and you get to think about greater things. And then most importantly, if being a protector is bigger than you think. It's not about being able to punch out that rude guy, at the hot dog stand or wherever you are. Being a protector, also you have to be able to protect financially. If your wife falls ill, maybe in UK, you guys have socialized medicine. In America, you're on your own. Your wife falls ill, you got some bills to pay, my friend. I grew up in a ghetto. I remember a friend of mine named Anthony. He got shot. And then my buddy Corey was calling 911. And Anthony's like, bro, no, just drive me. And that was the first time I realized that when you get driven to the hospital in the ambulance, you got to pay like 3,000 or 4,000 USD for that. It's expensive. And so he'd rather, after getting shot, get driven in the back of my buddy's dirty Cadillac to the hospital. So you have to be able to provide, protect financially. So it's another piece of your responsibility. I can go on and on about the merits of accumulating wealth. And one thing I truly believe, and the Christians are good at this, they have what's called prosperity preaching. The Muslims don't so much do this, but when you follow goodness and you do the right things, it's like money and abundance rains down on you. What is Allah other than abundance? He says something and it's created from it's abundance. And I think the true believers, the true followers, you follow the deen, you're disciplined, you live a virtuous life, you will earn very well. You'll save a lot of money. Do you know how much money I've saved not being in the club? You know how much money I've saved not buying women drinks, not destroying myself with alcohol such that I couldn't wake up early and work the next day? It is easy to get money when you're living the correct life and when you're around good people, but it is critical. Money's not everything. But if you don't have any, it's kind of like oxygen.
Yeah.
If you don't have any, it's like oxygen.
Yeah. I hate when people say, oh, money isn't everything, because it's like, well, you must have it because I don't have that much and I need it. So, and it's even more abundant. You need it even more when you have children and you want to provide the world for them and you want to put them into good schools and you want to live in a good country, or, we particularly don't want to live in the UK full time. I don't want my girls to be brought up in the UK. I'd rather they live in a Muslim country. We would rather put them into Islamic schools so that they learn the deen along with their education. They're not learning haram along with their education like they're teaching in schools just now.
Yes.
And my niche is Islamic parenting, and I see so many Muslim couples have issues like this. Either it's financial issues or how are they going to bring up their kids in a Western country. There's issues on who is the man and who is the woman in the house, who the roles are reversed, even though it clearly states in the Quran, this is your role, this is your role. People aren't looking to the Quran and Sunnah for guidance. And that's why my husband and I created this community to help other Muslim parents so that they could everybody can get together and sort of help each other out. And I love what you said. And there are so many merits to wealth, but what would you say to someone that will say, okay, yeah, I want to get started, but where do I start? What do I do? I know it's not as easy as do this and that'll give you all this stuff, but it's probably something that somebody wants to ask.
Oh, certainly. And this is actually my expertise. In terms of religious knowledge, this is not my expertise. You have to go to an imam, but this is what I do. The number one thing, anytime you want to be good at something, is make sure that you're practicing correctly. And your practice comes first from your knowledge, which is to say that action follows from thought. If you're thinking the wrong things, you're not going to do well. So the first thing is that you need to get rid of a couple misunderstandings. One such misunderstanding, I don't know if this has made it out your way, but in America, you often hear people say, follow your passion.
Yes.
So they have part one, follow your passion, and then part two, they say that?
Yeah, and I'm like,
That's so
"What is my
silly.
passion? I don't know what it is."
Yeah, it's so silly. Follow your passion and the money will come. That's
Yeah,
not true at all, actually. No one is going to get paid just because they're passionate about something. And in fact, if you ask a lot of young men today, what they're most passionate about is video games and masturbation. So, no, you're not about to get paid to touch yourself and to enjoy leisure.
yeah,
It should rightly be stated that you get paid for what others are passionate about you doing for them.
yeah.
So you get paid for what other people are passionate about you doing for them. So that's number one. You're offering value to a marketplace.
Mhm.
And so first thing you should ask yourself is, am I looking to go the entrepreneur route, or am I looking to get a high earning job doing something that I enjoy? These are two different things. Be my own boss, which involves a lot of other things you might have to consider: management, stress, dealing with other people, either being an extrovert or being a competent introvert. So it has a lot of other things that are involved. Does what I'm doing matter, or does only the money matter?
Mhm.
And then if you're going to execute on a job that's hopefully high earning, do I have the right skill set? And so many things. What do I want my lifestyle to look like? So there's a lot of basic questions you first want to ask. How many hours am I willing to work? How many hours do I want to work? Where
Yeah.
do I want to live? Am I going to be remote? Do I need to be on site? Then do I have the education and or training to actually do this thing? Then what's the cheat code? How do I actually get an unfair advantage or move along faster? These are all questions you want to ask before you even get started.
Mhm.
My specialty is in product-based business, one, and then also in software.
Right. Yeah.
When I say product-based business, I mean something that you
Yeah.
can sell and resell. When I say software, also hardware, but any mobile application, website, things like this. I love that because it's a high profit margin business. So that's what I specialize in. If you want to get started first, figure out what you already know how to do that people are passionate about you doing for them. Then ask yourself, do I need to skill up? What do I need my lifestyle to look like? Figure out how can I cheat, which is to say get there faster. In some cases, you don't need to do the school. You just need to do the certificate. In other cases, an apprenticeship will get you there faster. And those are the starting points. But here's the most important thing. Anytime you're going to make a big plan, human beings are born knowing nothing. I guess a bird, maybe they're born, they know how to fly south for the winter, but you're born just knowing how to use a restroom on yourself. That being the case, you want to get some expert advice. Generally, your parents don't know. I'm just being frank with you. I'm sure your parents are nice people, but most of your parents are not millionaires and they've not done maybe what you want to do. So you want to ask the person who actually knows. And if you have to pay for that advice, it's worth doing it. I remember I had a mentor. He created the largest online dating website on the planet Earth. And he said, "Hey, Marquett, I just want to let you know his wife invested in my company. So I want to let you know I'm not going to give you any money. So just don't ever ask. I just want to let you know straight away." He says, "But I'll give you advice that will save you millions and make you millions. Pay attention." And I did. And he allowed me to move really quickly because I was able to use his wisdom rather than go through the road of success, hitting every freaking pothole on the road. I could avoid those and drive faster. That's the
Yeah.
key.
Yeah. I really hope that helps someone and encourages men and women, but mostly men, to do better and be better and not think that they are stuck somewhere where they could never get out of. Because you can do it. Um, you say what you want online, and you're not afraid. Is that right? I can say that. That's true, isn't it? You do say what
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's
you're not
too
scared
true.
of. You're not worried of conflict or cancellation, like we were saying earlier. How can men inspire to have the same courage themselves, to like you seem to naturally have? How would you encourage men to speak the truth?
Well, speaking the truth is not the hardest thing, but to live out the truth is much harder. If the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, was just a speaker of the truth, just a preacher, I don't think he would have gotten very far.
Yeah.
I think what was most persuasive is that there are a number of things that he did, and really, for me, that's what always made him more interesting of a figure than Jesus, is that he had to go through human struggles.
Yeah.
Jesus, people will say, what would Jesus do? That's what they say in the States. And well, maybe Jesus would perform a miracle because he did miracles. But what would Muhammad do? Well, he had to do something, he had to deal with things I had to deal with. He had to deal with his wife being displeased. He had to deal with certain things like that I will encounter in my life. So anyways,
Yeah.
I say that to say, hit me with your question. I want to make sure I'm sharp. Hit me with your question.
Yeah, how can men inspire have the same courage
Okay.
themselves than you
Okay.
have in yourself?
Great. I don't want to go off the rails here.
No, no, please do.
So you mentioned being a speaker of truth. And I said, like, it's more important to take the actions. And for you to actually take actions, you have to have a base of confidence. And your confidence can't come from nowhere. It has to come from experience. And so I often encourage men to get experience. They say, Mark, what book should I read? No, reading books is great. I've read a ton of books, but the things that have stuck with me are all based on experience. And I think Confucius has some notes about this as well. So when you go out and get experience, especially you put yourself under challenge, when you don't have to, that's going to build something in you. It's going to build a well of strength from which you can draw. Also in my book, The Black Box, the black box is a concept circled around, every airplane has this box that's constantly recording. And if the plane crashes, you consult the box to see what happened. But we rarely consult the black box, which is to say your memories, your experience when things are going well. And we should, which is to say that generally anything you want to do, many times you've done it before, you've done something similar before, and you can draw on that pre-existing strength, and you should. And
Mhm.
also, the fact is that being scared is never going to help you win at anything. In fact, being aggressive is the key. And it is said in Italian that fortune favors the bold. And so I encourage all of you to be bold. I like to say, go forward like a fearless lunatic. That is what's going to get the job done. But at the end of the day, when we're talking about confidence, is going to come from experience, putting yourself to test, being able to stay calm in the face of fire, have presence of mind, and reflect back on your well of strength, knowing that you are truly a great person. And the last thing is having proper models. I think the Prophet Muhammad is one great model. There are a number of models you could reference, but I'd say he's, of course, the greatest among them.
Yes.
And the most important thing you have to remember from him is that he was the real deal, in as much as
Yep.
he is the most written about person in human history. Factual. This is not religious sources saying this. He
Mhm.
existed as you and I have stepped on this earth. And he had the companions, the companions of the Prophet Muhammad, the people who were around him, which means that he was under scrutiny. So he
Yep.
was who he said he was.
Mhm.
He had to actually behave according to what he was telling everyone and the verses that he revealed over a 23-year period. So the key is to actually be the real deal. You never have to pretend. And when
Yeah.
you can do that, you'll be empowered to get things done. And here's the most important piece as a stoic is that you have to be prepared to have everything taken from you and still be comfortable with that. And what I mean is that if you're a truly spiritual person, you're really connected with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or connected with something greater than yourself, you have two things that give you calmness and confidence. Number one is the idea that if you're really a hustler, anything they can take, you can get back. Number
Yep.
one. And then number two, you know that the greatest value is your connection with something bigger and better. And I heard a religious a friend of mine who's very religious. He's overweight, so somehow chocolate cake is stronger than the dean to him. But he said smart things, and he told me, he said, you know, your life here in the dunya is like when you're traveling and you have a layover in an airport. So
Mhm.
because you're looking at on the other side of it is eternity. Your
Mhm.
actual worldly life here is like a layover in the airport. Do you need to accumulate a bunch of things? Do you buy things when you're in your layover at the airport? It's a short time. It's almost meaningless when you consider eternity ahead of it.
Mhm.
And I say that to say, when you have that God consciousness, and you have the truth of who you are, and you're being consistent and honest, taking the actions to stand up is quite easy to do. And also, when you know that if everything is stripped away from you, you can still proceed, you'll be very unstoppable. And I tell you, if you're actually a Muslim man, or even a true Christian, or a good Jew, then the wicked people in our society, the power holders, they will try to strip everything away from you. I promise you they will. And you have to already be prepared for that mentally and be
Yeah.
willing to carry on.
Yeah. Thank you for that advice. I really hope it's helped someone. I have never heard you speak this way before. I know when you started YouTube, you did speak about Islam and being a Muslim, but a lot recently, I know we've had this chat offline. You've not been speaking as much, but you've got, from what we've had this conversation so far, you've got such great knowledge on the Prophet, on being a Muslim. You take it really seriously, and not just in a face value way, but practicing it from, exactly how you're supposed to practice it. But you've expressed concerns about present day Islamic leaders as well as, modern followers of the deen. Can I ask what your main criticism is of present day Islamic leaders just now?
Oh man.
Because it's sad that you don't want to talk about it more, and I wish you would, because you would encourage so many men.
So again, taking the Prophet Muhammad as an example.
Yeah.
I think in this social media era, when I see Islam on TikTok or Instagram, I'll often see a young Muslim man, often in the UK, curiously. Shout out to the Muslims in the UK. They're debating. They're debating a Christian, or they're debating an atheist. And it's all good and well to know the deen well, or to know the Quran or the Hadith very well, and to be able to explain and go through all these proofs. But I don't know that ever converts anyone. I don't think that making people feel intellectually inferior or making them look stupid or saying, ha, gotcha, is going to turn anyone to the deen.
Yeah.
And when I think about the two situations in which I observed someone's conduct and I said, what are you on? What are you following? Why do you behave this way? It's my aunt, who actually was not a Christian. She was a Jehovah's Witness. And my aunt was so kind and loving in everything that she did. And she was so considerate. And I was just like, why are you this way? Like my grandmother, your sister is not this way. Your other siblings are not this. What are you on that makes you so sweet and so pure? And you have so much goodness. I want you to be my mother. I would want someone like you to be my wife. She was Jehovah's Witness. It made me want to figure out, well, what do they do that's so powerful that it's affecting you like this? Then there was another man, he's a Mormon. We did Teach for America together, and I never met anyone who could operate on my sleep schedule. When we were training, you get very little sleep, and most people, they're looking bad. They look worn out. And, he and I, we were actually sharing the same room, ironically. And I would pop up crisp and he'd pop up crisp. And every night before he went to bed, he'd journal. And, we were both just running full speed, and he was keeping pace. And he was also very quick to ask for a favor. But I also noticed he was very quick to do a favor. And he was a remarkable man, very kind. And I was like, had to ask him, like, well, why are you like this? I knew why I was the way I was, but why are you like that? And so the observation that I made is that people will come to the deen, or they'll come to any way of life based on the demonstrated quality of the followers.
Yeah.
And right. And so that's one thing I try to focus on, which is like, how do I be a good example? And then number two, when I observe the Muslims, I find that they're not being a good example. And here's the worst thing with the leaders and how they're guiding the flock. So one of the things, and again, correct me if I'm wrong, Hadith, we're talking about, if you're greeted, one Muslim greets you, you should give them a more beautiful greeting. Is that an idea? Am I making that up?
No, that's true. Yeah,
okay.
No, that's true.
And we often have these stories about the kindness of the Prophet Muhammad. There was a cat sleeping, and it was sleeping on his blanket. And rather than move the blanket, he cut around the cat to leave the cat there. All these stories, kindness mostly.
Yeah.
There was a blind man, and he used to go and feed the blind man. All these beautiful stories. You heard the one about the blind man?
No, I actually haven't heard that one. No.
There's a ton of them. I think it was a Jewish blind beggar.
I know.
And he had no teeth. And he was speaking poorly. He's like, have you guys heard of the Prophet Muhammad? This guy's a heretic. This guy is evil. This guy is lying. He's corrupting the youth. He's a bad guy. And this man was a blind Jewish beggar. And one day a man came to him and fed him. He had no teeth, so the man would crush up the food and feed him with his hand. And he would come and do this every day. And then one day the man didn't show up. A different man showed up and fed him. And he said, who are you? The blind Jewish beggar said, who are you? He says, I've been coming to feed you. He says, no, you're not that man. That man had gentle hands, and he had a gentle way. He would crush up the food because I don't have teeth. He would feed me gently. He wouldn't really say anything. He was a gentle man. This was one of the companions of the prophet. And he said, oh, that was the prophet that used to feed you. And he said, oh, and he realized, oh, that's the guy that I was saying is evil, is a heretic, is a dirtbag, is spreading corruption among the youth. That guy. He never argued with him. He never tried to persuade him or debate him or outsmart him. He just did what he was supposed to do as a Muslim, as a good man. That was more persuasive to convert someone. These people today, they want to be famous. They want to make these videos, and they want to get all the money and travel around the world. Like Mufti Mink, she asked Mufti Mink, is it okay to be a homosexual? He says, oh, it's fine. Ask Mufti Mink, do you shake a woman's hand? Oh, yeah, why not? What do you mean, why not? You're not even supposed to be staring at the woman. So we see that these people are corrupted from the leadership. Of course, the corruption falls down to everyday people and to children. You have Andrew Tate coming to the Deen of Islam. MashaAllah, it's a beautiful thing to see more people receive the Deen through dawah. It's a terrible thing for people to idolize him. One thing we didn't want in Islam, we don't want the Prophet Muhammad to be revered in the way that Jesus is, confusing him for God. Now we confuse Mufti Mink for God. We confuse Andrew Tate for God. You follow Mufti Mink, he's lying about the deen. You follow Andrew Tate, he's smoking cigars and engaging in perversion. He's a pornographer. And this is what we're following? I have faults just like Mufti Mink and just like Andrew Tate. I've never been a pornographer, and I don't say it's okay to guzzle Skittles. But of course, I have my own faults. For that reason, I don't come out, the Muslim entrepreneur. Because I'm not even worthy of going under an Islamic microscope. I'm not even good enough for you to take an Islamic lens and look at me through that lens. So that's why I don't talk about it so much. And I think that the most of the people nowadays who are talking about it, you're a legal mufti. Is this a term? He's like he specializes in Sharia, right? Islamic law. So if anyone should know the jurisprudence, it would be him. And you see that they're misguiding and they're becoming scared, and they're really following the kuffar as though, you know, the law of the kuffar is greater than God's law. That is the problem. And then you have people who follow them like they're a celebrity rather than following them to get religious knowledge. When Mufti Mink speaks, he should never say, I think. He should never he gives a lot of great jokes, but really our religion is to say, God said, and you say what God said. You're just the person that's sharing what God said. Even the Prophet Muhammad is called a Rasul, which means messenger. You don't matter as the religious person. You're not supposed to, the scholar, the imam, you're not supposed to matter. They want to matter too much. So that's kind of what's bothering me. And shout out to some great religious scholars who are friends of mine. Shout out to Imam Siraj Wahaj. Shout out to Dr. Bilal Phillips. Shout out to Dr. Zakir Naik, whom I would love to meet. And maybe they have dirt on them too. I've not discovered it, and I'm not looking for dirt, but things that are as blatant as what Mufti Mink did, it was very disappointing to me.
Do you think that Islam is becoming a business a lot of the time now? I've heard a lot of people say that I've heard people are giving dawah, looking to get paid first and giving dawah later. And do you think that that is maybe what is driving these people to say certain things and to act certain ways, because it's now becoming not a trend, so to speak, but becoming a business, really, isn't it? And people that convert, it's like, oh, they've converted, and it's great. It's so good. And the reason why it's good for these people to convert is because they have such a big following. So it shines a light on Islam. But you're right. Are these people following Islam the way that you should be following it? Yeah, you're right. What is your opinion of modern day Ummah? What do you think we're doing wrong? How can we improve it? How can we get better? Can we get better?
Oh, can we? Absolutely. Yeah. There's yes, certainly we can. Yeah. I think that number one, we have to actually stick with the Quran, like read it and try to apply it, which is to say that, you know, I've been to Dubai a ton of times. And when we think of the Emiratis, or we look at Saudi and we look at the rulers, the rulers in these lands, Ferraris, Lamborghinis, and, you know, extraordinary palaces. And now, granted, this is why I don't call myself the Muslim entrepreneur. I got a Maybach, I got a Rolls Royce, I got a lot of cars, and I enjoy this.
Yes.
I also am not a Muslim leader. And I don't pretend as though I excel in, you know, the modesty that characterizes Islam. Honestly, one of the most beautiful things is the modesty of Islam. the modesty of the masjid, even though the beautiful might be the outside might be beautiful, and Arab architecture is just magnificent and unique. But you go inside the masjid, it's just, hey, it's carpet in here, face that way, and there's carpet. There's not a whole lot. It's modesty. You observe the women of the faith, and my respect to you and your husband. That is the beauty, is the way our women look, and the fact that they're not making a show of themselves, but to their husbands. And obviously, we have specific verses that speak of to whom you should be seen. So when you get to this position of getting away from the Quran, and we get sucked into what the mainstream cares about, the Ferraris, the Lamborghinis, and this is occurring in Saudi, this is occurring in the Arab states, the Gulf states, where theoretically, we talking about the Holy Land, and we're talking about the place where this should be purest. We have a problem. And also, we need more truth. And so the first thing we can do is open up that Quran, try to follow it as it's written. And then secondly, to get more truth so that we can understand who these leaders actually are, and also understand some folks that have been misunderstood and portrayed in the wrong light intentionally. I'm not going to name any name, but there was one such Islamic scholar who came from a very wealthy family, extraordinarily wealthy. He gave up all of his wealth. Now, mind you, this is a common story of religious people, gave up all of his wealth. He went to Yemen and Sudan and built roads and infrastructure and helped a lot of people. He wanted purity in Islam. He went around the Islamic world pursuing that. He even took up arms in the cause of Islam, because the communists are anti-religion, not just anti-Islam, not anti-Muslim. They're anti-religion. There is no God in communism. And he fought against that. And then all of a sudden, he became an international pariah. But at his core, what was he really? He was just a Muslim trying to execute on the Quran. And I say this not as a big beard guy, not as a guy dressed like like one of the dudes in Iran. Like, I'm wearing a proper business suit. I'm Western, but I know that they lied about that guy, and they've lied about a lot of guys. And our leadership, whether we're looking at the outright religious leadership or we're looking at the Arabs, and the Arabs matter. And as much as like the Holy Land is their country, it's not saying that they're any closer to God. But I remember there was one leader whom I also won't name. He was in a meeting with these political leaders, and he said, hey, you guys are so foolish that you fight among one another, and they, meaning the West, they will come and take out each of you one by one. 3 of the persons present, including that leader, are now all deceased. They didn't die of natural causes. The West came and got them, which is to say, yes, we mentioned money earlier. Money is important, but the Ummah is important, which is to say unity, which is one thing we have to know foundationally, is that we all actually have to stick together. It's critical. It doesn't matter what race you are. It doesn't matter what country. If you're Indian, oh, is he Desi? No, you can't marry him. All of this silliness, we actually have to come together and live in our way. That's the fundamental thing that's going to start to heal us. Read the Quran, apply it. Don't try to be like the West. Stick together and realize that there's still more similarity between a Shia and a Sunni than there is a Sunni and a non-believer, or a Sunni and a person who's a halfway believer in any other faith. And so I think those things are critical, and certainly we can reverse the breakdown that's occurring. We got to get started now, though. And we sadly, we do have to clean house. Like, dawah is mostly focused outward, right? Like we're trying to deliver the word to non-believers or people who have never heard of Islam. We actually have to start focusing it inward, which is to say, we have people who call themselves Muslim. How is it you were born Muslim? You don't speak any Arabic.
Yeah.
You never even attempted to memorize Quran. It's only 114 chapters. How is it that you have, I kid you not, I remember this one young lady I met, she's from Uzbekistan, tells me she's from a Muslim family. She doesn't even know what the word zina means. Zina. You don't know what that is. How did your father teach you anything? So we have people who say that they're Muslims. They're really not Muslims. We have to clean our house before we can go and start cleaning other people's house.
I will say, I'm a born Muslim, and I grew up in a house where education was a big thing and Islam was not. So I grew up not knowing much about Islam. I didn't learn how to pray Salah till I was a teenager.
Wow.
And it really hindered me because I looked to other things. Now, I never, like I said, I never went into alcohol, drugs, boys, that sort of thing was never my thing. But, I was still wanting to, Islam was never the main thing. I was a practicing Muslim. I had strong faith. I always believed in Allah, but I wasn't practicing, and I didn't read 5 times a day. I didn't wear hijab. It was about getting a good education, getting a good job, finding a good husband. And that was sort of my thing. And it's not until I had children, I was like, I don't want them to grow up like me. Do you know, I want them to have a clear path. And my husband was the same. And he was very much into Western values before we had kids. And we had kids and everything changed. And I read the Quran for the first time in English translation at 20-something-year-old
Wow.
women. And you're right, we, you know, born Muslims especially take it for granted, so to speak, because you're just told what to do. You're told to go and pray. You're told to read Quran in Arabic. You're told don't drink, don't smoke. You're never told why. You're never told
Right.
what is behind the reasoning. What is Allah teaching us? You don't know the life of the Prophet. You're completely right. And I completely agree with you. And I would encourage anybody who's a born Muslim, don't think you know everything. You probably know less than a revert, because they've actually done their research before they've reverted. So yeah, I definitely agree with you there. And I'm glad that you have shared that and stressed that. And you're right, we need to focus on our Ummah and focus on in-house before we are trying to focus on outside. So thank you for that. I do have a couple of more questions for you, brother, if you don't mind. I'm going to move on to the online space and how much full of degeneracy it is. Where morality is celebrated and championed now. Unfortunately, none of us are perfect. You know, we all make mistakes, we all sin. However, to not repent or to not take less corrective action and not to sin again is bad enough. But then certain individuals are promoting evils like cuckoldry or rainbow relations, or as you call it, eating Skittles, drug use, you know, all that sort of Islamophobia. It's a stuff for a lot, even child abuse. There's so much from people who are parents, you know, like I was just saying that if you become a parent, for me, that was my turning point. A lot of people are doing this and they've got younger children, which is mad. The same people who criticize yourself and Islam from behind a screen. And, you know, I'm sure if they were in the same room as any real practicing Muslim, they would be very careful what they say. I don't think they would have the courage to say half the things they do. I'm talking mainly about disgusting individuals like Adam22 and Destiny. I mean, the blue hair and the face tattoos are bad enough, but their lifestyles and the habits are pretty disgusting. I heard mostly about them through my husband. I don't want to see what they look like. I don't want to see any videos. I don't care. Enough of what he said was like, right, this is just, please stop talking. I don't want to know. And I feel sorry for them and for their children. Why do you think that people like this are celebrated in this day and age? What can we do to protect our children from people like this? You know, because like we said, everybody can look at these things at a touch of a button.
That's right. And that's a scary part because, you know, I remember when I was in UAE, not on my last trip, but my trip before that, I was observing two brothers in the UAE, Emiratis, and you know, unfortunately, every now and then you make a face that maybe you didn't mean to make, but you know, the brothers were a little bit too physical with one another, and one had like slapped the others behind. And I think I made a face of disgust, and then he saw me making the face, and he like starts like kind of going overboard with it, and just to make a show of it. And it's really sad to see an Emirati doing this kind of thing, right? And I was talking to a white girl that I know from the United States, and she was telling me, she was like, yeah, a lot of the Emirati guys guzzle Skittles. And I was like, really? She was like, yeah. She was like, she works for, what's the Emirates Airlines?
Yes.
Yeah, she works for Emirates, very high up. And she was like, yeah, a lot of these guys guzzle Skittles. They engage in this behavior. So one of the things about Islam is it encourages you to marry early. Now, sometimes we have the genders separated for too long and they end up doing unfortunate things, whether it's like strange masturbatory practices using sex toys, or it's watching pornography. We talk about being exposed to Adolf 22 or molestany. These guys, Adam's a pornographer.
Yeah.
And then Molestany is a Skittle guzzler. And when I think about, well, why is it so many persons could purport to be a Muslim, but somehow follow this kind of thing? They could purport to be a Muslim or be accepting and tolerant of things that really we shouldn't be tolerant of. And a part of it is, sadly, unlike probably you and I, is that they were exposed to unfortunate things growing up, like pornography. Like I wasn't exposed to pornography as a child. It's not particularly because I was any more moral than my peer. You just couldn't watch it. It just wasn't available. Now it's very easily available, and even children have cell phones. So I think that's number one, is the kids watch pornography and they're exposed to unnatural sex acts. And when you look at that homepage, there's all kinds of things on that homepage, all kinds of just wild things. Like abnormal sex. And so when you're observing deviant behavior over time, you become desensitized. And in as much as that's the case, they become desensitized and then things seem okay. And also, we never really want to shine a spotlight on ourselves such that we might be susceptible to being wrong or not being good enough. And it's hard to tell the truth about ourselves. And so, we tend to deny. And I think these guys are mascots and superheroes for certain personalities that have been developed in the society. And what I mean is this: with Adolf 22, he has money. A lot of people are obsessed with money. Money's their actual god. The money is the god of many human beings. So he has money. And he appears to have an unlimited supply of women to sleep with, in as much as he's a porn star, so he gets to sleep with women. Never mind he's paying them, never mind they have no soul. And then he even offers up his woman. Well, it makes sense. I mean, he has no self-respect. How could he respect anyone else? These things are very unnatural, and the sad thing about it is that they're being promoted. And I said earlier, 17 marketing messages and you will fall. And what's happening is these things are being marketed and remarketed. And because you and I, we can produce. Well, Allah has created man and woman together. We can reproduce, and create life, as you and your husband have done. And in my compliments to your family, the Skittle guzzlers cannot reproduce, so they must convert. They give their own form of dawah. Yeah. They've created a masjid of Satan, and they give their own dawah, and they give their dawah in our public schools.
They're doing
They give their dawah on Netflix shows subtly. Yeah. They give their dawah in Disney cartoons, and they keep on pushing forward their ideas. And here's the irony: is it goes under the guise of love and acceptance. Love and acceptance.
Yeah.
How can there be love where there is no procreation?
Yes.
Right. And should we accept everything?
Yeah.
And so they've given so much dawah that they've worn down the human being. The average person is not a fighter. And that is why the Muslim, not being the average person, we must maintain our fighting spirit and also be able to speak intelligently against this, not only from a religious standpoint, but also from a secular standpoint, from a scientific standpoint. Speak intelligently, respectfully, and also continue to exceed in displaying that we are people of love and people of kindness, even as we say, I don't condone that.
Yeah. Yeah. You're so right. It's too much now. It's too much. But my daughter, she's only 2. She's 2.5, and we got given books by the NHS here is our health service, and they give I know we're very lucky here. They give books to children at that age, and she got a book, and inside the book it said it said Daryl wears a dress, a boy wears a dress. And I was like, boys don't wear dresses. And I was like, why is that in a book for a 2-year-old? Like, it's insane. Like, what do you want from my child? Like, do you know, it's scary. So you have to, and parents aren't then screening their kids. Like, they're not making sure what they watch, what they see. It's very difficult to, it's sad. It's really sad. And I hope that people will actually have a voice and say, this is not, if you want to do you, go ahead. Just don't come near me or my children.
Well, you know what? I would even challenge that. One, I have a utmost respect for what you're doing, because as a mother, being the first teacher of the child, you get to give an example to women of like, hey, I was wise enough to look at the book before my kid looked at the book. Yeah. And I decided that this is not worthy. These are the examples. This is the training that they need. But one thing you have mentioned that I think is no longer true, which is, hey, just stay on your side and we'll be fine. Well, historically, we found that the West, and we're speaking of the West as a value set, they're not willing to stay on their side, right? Like, they're not willing to stay on their side. I mean, you look anywhere in the world, they always show up and they tell you how to live your life. They really want to do away with Islam and give secular, some version of democracy, as they call it. And so they're not going to stay on their side. And if we know that they're not going to stay on their side, then we must confront them, because that's what they're doing to us. They're confronting us, and they're trying to take our children. You said my child, my daughter, my son. Well, that's the key, is that they're trying to make your child property of the state, property of the government. Yeah. They're trying to remove you as a parent and become the parent. And so we actually do have to fight against this. It can't be, hey, we'll stay on our side, you stay on your side. We've actually passed that time. We are now in a war, but we're losing because we've not realized that the war has started.
Yes, you're so right. Yeah. And I'm glad people like you are speaking out about it. And we all do need to speak out about it a lot more. You have always said that you're not red pill. Yeah, people try and label it. a lot. I've heard that a lot from your way and try to throw shade your way, which must be really frustrating for someone that's said so many times that I'm not red pill. And I personally think that being red pill is just as bad as radical feminism.
Yes.
And you share, you know, the global attention of young men and other influencers that are connected to Islam. There's people like Andrew Tate, Myron Gaines, Sneeko, John Zerka. What are your thoughts on individuals like them, if you have any thoughts? I know we spoke briefly about Andrew Tate previously.
Sure. So it's funny how much these folks have in common.
Yeah, they do actually have.
Yeah, they have a lot in common. So number one, with regards to folks describing me as red pill errantly, when I first came out, I said I don't take pills of any kind. We're no pill on this side. Lies are always going to be put forward by wicked people. This is just par for the course. So that is something we have to come to accept. There's so many comedies we can observe. You know, I had a situation where I was debating a guy who went to school for music, dropped out, couldn't finish the degree, and you know, where I pointed out that he scammed his followers with an NFT, even though he said that NFTs are scams. Then he turns around and asks me what an NFT is. I said, that's silly. Let's not waste time on silly questions. Why is it silly? Between you and I have way more education, and my background is in technology. I'm an inventor of technology. That's like asking a basketball player, what is a travel? What's a double dribble? Like, this is come on, it's silliness. But you have, you know, wicked people on the internet. They'll try to take that and run with it and create a narrative. So the lies will always be there. So it doesn't bother me. I expect it to be there. It's just silliness. But we also have to know that while they create narratives, we also have to create narratives. While they create marketing messages, we also have to create marketing messages. That's number one. Then number two, with regards to these folks, they have similar behaviors. And you know, you got Destiny, who's out of the closet. Then you have Sneeko, who is 1 foot in the closet, 1 foot out of the closet. It's the most dangerous person, in as much as, you know, people might have grown up on the internet. They grew up with Sneeko. They feel like he's a part of their family, and they've been following him for years, and they like him. And so as he transitions out of the closet, they're going to go with him, you know, because they like him. And that's extremely problematic, because we know in Sneeko's case, he also engaged in the same behavior that Adolf 22, sharing his woman with another guy. But in Sneeko's case, he was actually there on the same bed when it occurred. I mean, these are things that are vomitous. Like, it's hard to even imagine that someone would do it and then admit it in the public. It's crazy. Just no morals whatsoever. Then you look at a person like John Zerka, who really is a great caricature of, he's kind of like a Tekashi 6ix9ine. I don't know if you're familiar with this guy, which is essentially a figure who utilizes what is common today to try to find stardom, in as much as, well, what do you believe? What do you stand for? What's your talent? Like, what have you done in the world? Do you have any accolades? Do you have any talent I should know of? Like what are you famous for? Well, in this era, people are, you know, women are famous for showing their behind on Instagram. They call it an Instagram model, if there was ever such a thing. People are famous for doing outrageous things or doing skits when they're really just being rude and impolite to people out in the public. Or they're famous for being outrageous, like Tekashi 6ix9ine has rainbow colored hair and rainbow colored teeth and tattoos all over the face, which is to say being extreme, like you're being like a human cartoon. And so he's that same kind of character. And you'll notice that consistently with all these guys, they got fake veneer teeth. They're wearing sunglasses indoors because they think it makes them look like a Hollywood celebrity, though they are mostly devoid of grace and star quality. And they say crazy things because it gets attention. And eventually, I think these things will catch up with all of them. But I think they're pretty much all a part of the same pack, which is why they hang out together. They do collaborations together. And that's why I don't take interviews. That's why I'm not seen with these persons, because we have to stand apart and we have to stand against these kinds of things.
Yep. I'm glad that you have stressed that, and I'm glad that you've cleared that up, because I think there's a lot of misconceptions about these people sometimes, and the truth needs to be told, like you usually do. I apologize if you can hear my child in the background. It's her bedtime, and she's screaming for me to go and help her, but she's fine. I've just got this final question for you, brother, if you don't mind me asking it. I think you would make an excellent father, and inshallah, one day you will become a dad. Um, and to many young men, you already seem like a father figure. Like you said previously, you know, when you were working with underprivileged kids, they thought of you as their dad, which is a beautiful thing. Do you have any aspirations to have children? Is that something that's in your plan? And would you raise them as Muslim? I'm assuming that that would be a yes.
Will I have children? Inshallah. And will they be raised as Muslim? I think that I will educate them on everything I've been educated on. And I believe that they will choose the straight path.
Yes.
And so I will educate them on all that there is within the religious spectrum. And of course, I will have my practices. You observe someone make salah, you're going to make salah as well.
Yes.
You observe someone prepare for prayer, you're going to wonder what they're doing. You're going to ask questions. And I think the example is always the best way rather than force. And you had mentioned understanding the why. Why do we live this way? Why do we think this way? Why do you clean your hands up to the elbow?
Yeah.
So that is the approach that I would like to take. And, God willing, they will follow the straight path.
Yeah, inshallah, that's what we do in our home. You know, we do that now, and mashallah, my daughter, she's only 2.5. She reads Salah with us. She makes us read it more than we should, which is good. And she thinks of it as a sort of a game almost. But and you know, she does dua every night before she goes to bed. So she learns from example, but from what we're doing. So you're completely right. And even online to other people, like you said previously, if we show what we're doing is Islamic, inshallah, other people will follow. And I hope, inshallah, one day, brother, that you find strength in the Ummah again, and that you share about Islam, because, like I said, you've got such a great following, and so many men and women, but particularly men, could use that advice and could use that role model. And you would make a great person to be a role model for Islam.
Well,
We're
thank you.
all
That's a very high compliment. I really appreciate that.
No, thank you so much for joining me. I apologize if we've gone a little bit over, but I really appreciated your time today. And I've seen you, like I said, I've seen you in a new light, and you've got so much knowledge of the Deen. And yeah, thank you for sharing that with us today. And I hope you have a great day. You've still got a whole day, and my
Yes.
day indeed now. And I've got so much to do. But yes, you've still got a whole day. So inshallah, if you ever come to Scotland, please, my husband, I'm sure he'll be so happy to meet you. Like I said, he really likes your content. So I know that he would love to meet you one day, inshallah. And I'm sure you would enjoy meeting him too.
Absolutely, I would. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Assalamu alaikum, everybody.
Alaikum
Thank
assalam.